This video is sponsored by the 6 vs 6 tactical multiplayer strategy game War Robots. War Robots is full of fast-paced action and is constantly updated with new maps, robots and game modes. Support our channel and install the game via the link in the description and you will get a huge starter pack with a war robot, 4 different weapons, 100 gold and 400,000 silver. The game allows you to choose your robot and fight in a rich 3D environment against more than 70 million players. The First Mithridatic War had ended. Lucius Cornelius Sulla returned to Rome to deal with his political enemies. Mithridates retained control of his Pontic kingdom, but was forced to give up all of his gains. This unusually lenient agreement rendered the Republic's situation in Anatolia unsustainable. The treaty, as well as Mithridates' ambition for further conquest, made the next 2 decades of conflict inevitable. Welcome to our account of the Second and Third Mithridatic Wars. The fragile peace achieved at Dardanos in 85 BC couldn't last for long. After Sulla's withdrawal, Phrygia, Galatia and Cappadocia, as well as the legions in the area, were placed under the command of his trusted general, Lucius Licinius Murena. Meanwhile, as his Black Sea holdings rebelled, Mithridates started raising a new army and navy. The king's favoured general, Archelaus, who had lost a few battles against Sulla in the previous war, was afraid for his life and defected to Murena. He stoked the fears of the Roman general, claiming that Mithridates was planning to break the truce. So, in 83 BC, Murena attacked Pontic territory on the border with Cappadocia and took a few towns. Mithridates sent envoys to invoke the former peace treaty, but this was ignored. We have almost no details on the conflict that would later be known as the Second Mithridatic War, but it seems that in 82 BC, Murena invaded Pontic territory once again, while Mithridates sent his general Gordius to retaliate and plunder the province of Asia Minor. After much maneuvering, Gordius's army encountered the legions of Murena, with both taking up a defensive position with the Halys River between them. The 2 commanders initially waited on opposite sides of the river, but soon Mithridates appeared and reinforced the waiting Gordius with a much larger contingent. Despite the desperate Roman defense of the crossings, the Pontic army forced the river and with their superior numbers crushed Murena's troops. After this defeat, Murena received a message from Sulla ordering him to end the war and make peace with Pontus. He obeyed, but the damage had already been done. Mithridates restored his prestige, and the smaller kingdoms in the region started looking up to him again. The Pontic king used this respite to subdue the unrest in Colchis. He then returned to his capital at Sinope and sent ambassadors to Rome to sign the formal peace agreements. Meanwhile, the Roman-appointed king of Cappadocia, Ariobarzanes, complained to Sulla that Mithridates was still occupying some Cappadocian land. Mithridates was reluctant to relinquish the territory, but Sulla commanded him to do so, and the Pontic king obeyed to avoid a new conflict. However, in 78 BC, Sulla passed away, and that changed the balance of power in the region yet again. Mithridates once again asked his son-in-law, the Armenian king Tigranes II, to invade Cappadocia in order to avoid being seen as the aggressor. While these events were taking place in Asia, a rebellious Roman commander in Hispania, Sertorius, was warring against the Senate, and a big part of the Roman army was in the area fighting him. Members of his faction came to Sinope and suggested to Mithridates that they become allies. Sertorius then sent some advisors to assist Pontus, but the main reason for war was that the childless king of Bithynia, Nicomedes IV, made Rome the heir of his realm. Mithridates couldn't allow Rome to gain more power in the region, so when Nicomedes passed away in 74 BC, the war became inevitable. Mithridates made his move in the same year and invaded Bithynia once again. Meanwhile, the two consuls of the previous year, Lucius Licinius Lucullus and Marcus Aurelius Cotta, were appointed the governors of Asia Minor and Bithynia respectively. They devised a plan. Lucullus was to attack via land from Asia Minor into Pontus, while Cotta would lead the fleet along the coast. Waiting for Lucullus, Cotta started gathering his fleet in Chalcedon, but was too slow. The Pontic fleet blockaded the Roman vessels in the harbour, and then proceeded to destroy or capture most of them. This left Mithridates almost unopposed in Anatolia. He left a small portion of his army and a fleet near Tenedos to block any Roman reinforcements, and set out to siege the coastal city of Cyzicus. In 73 BC, Lucullus entered the region. He now had 3 legions under his command and a number of allied troops for a total strength of 30,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry. Lucullus quickly defeated the forces left at Tenedos and marched towards Cyzicus to confront the Pontic forces. However, there was only one narrow pass leading from the west, and Mithridates had a strong guard there. But as Sertorius was assassinated in Hispania, the advisors he sent to Pontus were eager to restore their position in Rome, and had begun secret subversive communications with Lucullus. They convinced Mithridates to allow the Romans through the pass, claiming that 2 of his legions were ready to desert. This was a lie. The Pontic guard left the pass, and the legions then fortified a hill near the Pontic camp so that Mithridates could not be supplied by land. Nevertheless, as he had more than 50,000 troops under his command, he continued the siege. The king initially sent 3,000 Cyzican prisoners on ships so that the citizens would let him in, but that failed. Then a massive tower erected on 2 ships was pushed towards the walls, from which a bridge was projected, allowing the Pontic soldiers to enter the city. The defenders were surprised by the device, so this succeeded at first. But eventually, the Pontic troops were pushed out and had to retreat. Meanwhile, land forces attacking with siege towers and rams were repelled 3 times in a single day. Finally, a section of the weakened wall gave way in the evening, but the defenders built improvised fortifications behind it. The assault had failed. After this, the king's siege engines were all destroyed by a large storm. At this point, Mithridates decided that his cavalry were not useful in a siege, and sent them away in order to save supplies. However, the Romans, who had been waiting on the hill, charged down as the cavalry was crossing a river, capturing thousands and killing many more. Supplies could not reach the Pontic army when winter came, and many of the men died of starvation and plague. Seeing this, the defenders began to sally out frequently, and this convinced Mithridates to lift the siege. In early 72 BC, the king evacuated with his fleet, while his army withdrew overland. More Pontic troops died crossing a swollen river. Lucullus also attacked them here and caused more casualties. Back in Cyzicus, games were instituted in honour of Lucullus, which were celebrated for centuries after, called the Lucullian Games. Lucullus continued to advance against Mithridates, with both sides winning and losing a few minor battles. Mithridates had to escape to Armenia in the east with only 2,000 cavalry, whilst the Romans captured key cities within the Pontic heartland, finally capturing Sinope a few weeks later. By 71 BC, most of Anatolia was under Roman control. In the same year, Lucullus sent friendly envoys to the son of Mithridates, king of Bosphorus, Machaerus, who betrayed his father and agreed to become a client of Rome. He also demanded that Tigranes should surrender his father-in-law, but the latter refused. The Armenian king controlled eastern Anatolia, Cilicia, parts of Syria, Iran, and the Caucasus, and was confident. The Roman general spent 70 BC building up the Roman military and administrative presence in Anatolia. In 69 BC, he finally moved against Tigranes, with an army consisting of 35,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Meanwhile, Tigranes was supported by the kings of Iberia and Albania, and had more than 80,000 under his command. He was eager to engage Lucullus, and ignored Mithridates' advice to avoid open battle. While Tigranes was still recruiting troops, Lucullus marched straight at Tigranocerta and besieged it. Soon after, the Armenian army approached and the Romans fell back behind the river. Tigranes started forming up in front of a hill with a small group of phalangites in the center, surrounded by melee infantry, and with missile troops in front. His heavy cavalry, cataphracts, were placed on the right flank, while a bigger group of horse archers manned the left. Lucullus knew that he was outnumbered, so he formed most of his army in a single line to avoid being outflanked. He had legionaries in the center, with an equal number of cavalry on either flank. A force of light Bithynian skirmishers was screening his infantry. Initially, Lucullus intended to make a running charge into the Armenians with his infantry, so that their missile units would not have much time to grind the Romans down. But at the last moment he pulled his men back to try something else. Lucullus knew that the cataphracts were the greatest danger to his infantry, so the Roman and allied cavalry were sent against the Armenians, but retreated slowly without committing to the battle. This feigned retreat distracted the forces of Tigranes and allowed Lucullus to personally lead 2 maniples of his infantry on a wide flanking maneuver across the river and around the enemy's right side, in order to occupy the hill behind the Armenian army. Coming to the top of the hill, the Roman commander saw that the relatively undisciplined enemy forces had broken their formation in pursuit of the Roman cavalry. He decided this was the moment, and charged down the hill into the rear of the Armenian cataphracts. The Armenian cavalrymen were surprised and attempted to escape, but crashed into their own infantry, causing a massive panic in the center, which began to break rank en masse. Tigranes escaped with his baggage train. Casualties for this battle are disputed, but the Romans probably only suffered moderately, whereas the Armenian army was almost entirely broken, and their capital was surrendered. Lucullus continued his campaign and pushed Tigranes to the east. A year later, in 68 BC, the Romans won another battle at Artaxata. Unfortunately for Lucullus, Mithridates left Tigranes and returned to his kingdom in 67 BC. The Romans had less than 10,000 troops defending the area, and Mithridates utterly defeated them at Zela. Lucullus was forced to retreat from Armenia to avoid encirclement. His army mutinied, and in 66 BC he was replaced by Gnaeus Pompey. At that point, the Romans outnumbered Mithridates, and his pleas for peace were ignored. Pompey defeated the king at the Battle of Lycus. At the same time, the Romans entered into an alliance with the Parthians, and when the latter attacked Armenia, Tigranes was forced to become a Roman client. Mithridates was forced to withdraw north into Colchis in 65 BC. Pompey was pursuing close behind. The Romans defeated the Iberians and Albanians along the way. That gave Mithridates time to murder his traitorous son Machaerus. He was aiming to attack Rome again, but the populace was war-weary and backed his younger son Pharnaces in rebellion in 63 BC. This betrayal was the last straw, and Mithridates tried to commit a suicide by poison. The poison would not work, and his bodyguard killed him. The Third Mithridatic War was concluded. Pompey continued his campaigns in the east, and the wars with the Pontic kingdom were far from over, but that is a tale for another documentary. Thank you for watching our documentary on the Second and Third Mithridatic Wars. If you want to see more videos on Roman history, please share this video. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us directly via YouTube by pressing the sponsorship button below the video, or buy our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.